On December 4th, 1972, 7-year-old Stephen Stainer was approached by a stranger, Irvin, who claimed to be a church representative and asked for donations. When Stephen willingly shared his address, a white Buick driven by Kenneth Parnell pulled up, and Stephen got in. He was then driven to a cabin in Cathy's Valley near his grandfather's home, where he was held captive. Kenneth Parnell was a deeply troubled individual with a history of crime, including car theft, arson, and a severe sexual assault of an 8-year-old boy in 1951, for which he served prison time and even escaped. He exhibited disturbing behaviors from a young age, including attempting to remove his own teeth and self-harm. Irvin, described as trusting, naive, and simple-minded, met Kenneth at a resort where they were co-workers. Kenneth manipulated Irvin into helping him abduct children, claiming he wanted to raise them in a religious-type deal. Irvin was left on the sidewalk after Stephen was abducted by Kenneth in the Buick. From the first night, Stephen was sexually assaulted by Kenneth. Approximately 2 weeks later, these assaults became regular. Kenneth convinced Stephen that his parents had given him legal custody and no longer wanted him, a psychological manipulation that deeply affected the child. Stephen's name was eventually changed to Dennis Gregory Parnell. Kenneth Parnell enrolled Stephen in various schools to maintain a semblance of normalcy. He would often leave Stephen alone at home and allowed him to drink at a young age. Despite being able to leave, Stephen stayed because he didn't know where to seek help. A woman named Barbara Mace lived with Kenneth and Stephen for about 18 months, claiming she believed they were father and son, even though Stephen showed discomfort with Kenneth and they didn't resemble each other. Stephen later revealed that in 1975, Kenneth instructed Barbara to attempt to kidnap a young boy, but the attempt was unsuccessful. The speaker expresses disbelief at Barbara's claim of ignorance, suggesting she was complicit. Stephen, who had started calling Kenneth Dad about a week after his abduction, thought about his parents often during his 7 years of captivity. As Stephen grew older and hit puberty, Kenneth's interest in him waned, and he began seeking younger boys to kidnap and replace Stephen. He started using Stephen to abduct other boys, a tactic that reminds the speaker of the movie Changeling. However, Stephen purposefully sabotaged every abduction attempt, leading to Kenneth's resentment. In February 1980, Stephen, along with a friend named Randall Poorman, kidnapped 5-year-old Timothy White. On March 1st, while Kenneth was at his night security job, Stephen took Timmy and hitchhiked to nearby Ukiah. After failing to find Timmy's house, Stephen went to a police station, famously stating, "I know my first name is Stephen." This line became iconic, leading to a book and a television movie, making Stephen famous. On March 2nd, Kenneth Parnell was arrested and charged with abduction. Both Stephen and Timmy were reunited with their families. Parnell was convicted of 2 counts of kidnapping and sentenced to 7 years in prison with parole after 5, a sentence the speaker finds outrageously insufficient given the severity and duration of his crimes, especially since he wasn't charged with sexual assault due to the statute of limitations. Irvin Murphy and Randall Poorman were convicted of lesser charges for aiding in the kidnappings. Stephen recalled Murphy being kind to him initially and believed Murphy was as much a victim as he was, possibly due to Stockholm Syndrome, though the speaker acknowledges the difficulty of understanding Murphy's culpability given his alleged naive nature and the clear wrongness of his actions. Stephen Stainer's return was met with intense media attention, leading him to tour the nation for morning shows and interviews. This sudden thrust into the spotlight was overwhelming for Stephen, who had spent 7 years in the shadows. He struggled to adjust to normal life, particularly sharing a room and possessions with his siblings, as he was used to being an only child. His older brother, Kerry, seemed less enthusiastic about Stephen's return and sharing a room. Stephen faced ostracism and cruel questioning about his sexuality from his peers at school, leading him to drop out and turn to drinking. This strained his relationship with his father, who eventually kicked him out. Stephen revealed that his father refused to hug him after the cameras were gone, making him feel that his father had become heartless. Years after the trial, Stephen continued to deal with reporters. In 1985, he married Jody Edmondson, had 2 children, Stephen Jr. and Ashley, and settled in Merced, the place of his abduction. He worked at a pizza shop and dedicated his spare time to a child abduction group, aiding in the search for missing children. Tragically, on September 16, 1989, Stephen was killed in a motorcycle accident, colliding with a car driven by Antonio L. This marked another devastating loss for the Stainer family. Shortly before his death, a two-part miniseries titled I Know My Name is Stephen was released, chronicling his story, followed by a book of the same name. In 2010, the city of Merced unveiled a bronze statue of Stephen holding Timmy White's hand, immortalizing his heroic and tragic story. However, the immense attention Stephen received left his siblings feeling neglected, especially Carrie. Carrie, who was 11 when Stephen disappeared, was deeply affected, feeling guilty for not being able to protect his younger brother. He reportedly wished on a star every clear night for Stephen's return, a ritual he continued even after Stephen came home. The story takes a dark turn with the introduction of Carrie's future. While Stephen's life ended tragically, Carrie, quote, was about to write his own one far darker than anyone else could have ever imagined. He became known as the, quote, Yosemite Killer. In February 1999, during a sightseeing trip to Yosemite, Carrie's son, his daughter Julie, and their friend Silvina Peloso vanished. Weeks later, the bodies of Carrie's son and Silvina were found in their charred rental car at the bottom of a cliff. Julie's body was missing, and the killer sent the FBI a hand-drawn map with a chilling message. Quote, "We had fun with this one." Even after Stephen's safe return, Cary Stayner continued a peculiar ritual. Nightly, he would walk several blocks away, pick a star, and repeat his wish for Stephen to come home, only remembering that Stephen was already safe and then thanking the star. While seemingly sweet, this highlights Cary's persistent emotional struggle. The speaker notes the sad reality of Cary's childhood post Stephen's return. Quote, "He was overshadowed and essentially left behind." At 11, Cary still needed parental guidance, but his parents' focus shifted entirely. Initially, their sole purpose was finding Stephen. Then, once Stephen was found, their attention became consumed by the media frenzy surrounding him and his well-being. The father, Delbert, oscillated between deep depression and an intense focus on Stephen. The speaker expresses sympathy for Cary and his siblings, who were neglected as their parents emotionally imploded, though this sympathy is tempered by Cary's eventual murderous actions. Cary possessed unique talents that his parents overlooked. In high school, he was nominated as the most creative student, with many believing he'd become a graphic artist or cartoonist. He also played baseball in the outfield. Described as quiet and reserved, Cary likely felt his feelings and opinions were devalued due to his family's preoccupation with Stephen. Despite this, he was also known as one of the nicest people, rarely bothered by anything and without anger issues. By the time Stephen came home, Cary was 18, an adult on his own merits, and likely had fully accepted that he would never see his brother again. Stephen's return, while a relief, thrust Cary back into the shadows. Neighbors who had lived near the Stayners for 20 years corroborated this. Michael Coleman stated that when Stephen returned, Cary was put back on the shelf. He was in the background always. Another longtime neighbor, Victoria Flores Tatum, observed, "Harry was very frustrated at all the publicity Stephen was getting. I think Cary wants as much attention as Stephen got, and he would." The speaker remarks on Victoria's unwitting prophecy. Cary's alienation intensified with Stephen's tragic death in a motorcycle accident in 1989. While heartbreaking, Stephen's death only further solidified his hero fame, even in death. This left Cary to grapple with persistent feelings of inadequacy and emotional distance from his family. His emotional turmoil may have led him to move in with his uncle, Jesse Stayner. In 1990, Jesse was found dead from a single gunshot, a murder that was never solved. The speaker hints at knowing the killer. Significantly, when Jesse's murder was reported, the newspaper headlines conspicuously used "Stephen Stayner, Uncle Murdered," completely omitting Cary's name, further illustrating how media continued to overshadow Cary. Cary worked various trades, including a long stint as a glass cutter. A friend and co-worker, Mike Mares, once found Cary punching plywood until his hands bled, revealing a deeply disturbing internal state. Cary confided in Mike that he was having a nervous breakdown and wanted to drive into work and kill everyone there and then torch the place. A clear red flag. Investigators initially suspected ex-cons Michael Roy Larwick and Eugene Earl Dykes for the murders of Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Silvina Peloso due to their criminal histories and connections to the crime scene. However, Larwick maintained his innocence, even offering a polygraph and DNA, stating, "I ain't got nothing to do with this, you've got the wrong guy." his innocence would be confirmed. 5 months later, in July 1999, Joey Armstrong, a 26-year-old naturalist, disappeared from her cabin in Yosemite. Her decapitated body was found half a mile away, her head floating in the water. Evidence at the crime scene, coupled with sightings of Cary Stayner's distinctive car in the area, led investigators to him. He was initially brought in as a witness after being recognized at a nudist colony. FBI agent Jeff Riddick, who had previously questioned Cary after the first 3 murders, found it odd when Cary raised his hands above his head upon being found. During a casual interview where Cary was eating pizza with agents, he began to spill his guts, confessing to killing Joey Armstrong, as well as Carol, Julie, and Sylvina. In his book, In the Name of the Children, Jeff Riddick details Cary's horrifying demands during his confession. Cary tried to negotiate conditions for his cooperation. He wanted his family to receive the reward money for the women's discovery, to be placed in a federal prison near his family, and, most disturbingly, to receive images and videos of young girls. Investigators allowed him to pick only one, and Cary chose the images of young girls over money for his family or proximity to them. He ultimately confessed after Riddick appealed to the idea of catharsis, and, as the speaker speculates, possibly to seize the spotlight and fame that had eluded him.